Welcome to the Terrible Podcast with your hosts from SteelersDepot.com, where you can find all your latest and greatest Steelers news. It's Dave Bryan and Alex Kozora, always lit, talking Steelers. And now, here's Dave and Alex.
Welcome to the Terrible Podcast, Season 15, Episode 47. He's Dave Bryan. I'm Alex Kozora, SteelersDepot.com. Thanks for being back with us this Monday, Steelers Nation. The Pittsburgh Steelers remain in first place. The clocks have been turned back. The Raiders have fired everybody. All is right in the world today, exiting this bye week as we get ready for week number 10 for the Pittsburgh Steelers facing the Washington Commanders. So a relatively quiet weekend, which I think we both can appreciate after that gauntlet of night games. So I'll take a pretty restful weekend. Hopefully you got the same, Dave.
Yeah, absolutely. Bye week came for a good time for us.
For sure.
As well, especially after that series of night games there. And interesting morning around the NFL with the Saints firing Dennis Allen and the Raiders firing a lot of people on their offensive coaching staff there. And we're about that time of the season where it's going to be interesting to see some of these teams that look to be pretty much out of it. Obviously, the trade deadline on Tuesday evening, and we'll sit and wait to see if the Pittsburgh Steelers do anything there. The AFC North shaping up to be a three-dog battle, if you will, along with, on top of it, a game to look forward to on Thursday between the Ravens and the Bengals. The Steelers coming off a bye, get a very impressive Washington Commanders team, and luckily with there being no game for us to have to recap this week, we'll get a jump on the all 22 stuff earlier this week, and Mike Tomlin speaking on Tuesday, and transactions to talk about even on this Monday morning. So let's get after it.
Yeah, let's do it, and let's start with some housekeeping. Pittsburgh kind enough to make a roster move announcement before a podcast. We talked about our surprise collectively at the team waiving offensive tackle Dylan Cook last Thursday. He has rejoined the team to the practice squad, though no longer on the 53-man roster. He'll fill that last remaining open practice squad spot. So Cook back with the team on the practice squad. Again, still a little surprised on the approach they took, but I guess their calculation was, instead of having a choice between a Calvin Anderson and Dylan Cook, let's just keep them both, and figured they could get Cook through waivers, who went unclaimed and is now on the taxi squad. So hopefully a chance for him to still stick with the team in the future. But obviously it's been a bit of a disappointing season, getting hurt and then being cut, now being on the practice squad.
Yeah, at least he circled back, and we're reaching that time of year where injuries around the league makes you kind of wonder, if a player here or there might be poached or something. So that'll be something to look at. But it's not like Dylan Cook has played a lot of NFL snaps overall. So you got a full practice squad. Once again, right? I think you got the numbers back to where they need to be, and you've got a guy that's familiar with your organization. It was a curious move for them to waive him initially, but they obviously had their reasons behind it, and onward we go into week number 10 now.
And you talk about teams potentially poaching for injury, and then even late in the season, week 16, 17, 18, sometimes teams will add a guy in hopes of keeping them for a reserve futures contract after, to kind of get a look at a young guy, and somebody like Dylan Cook to play left tackle with some talent. You wonder if late in the season, won't be right now, that a team would try to poach him away, but those are all going to be tomorrow's problems. All right, Dave, let's talk about what do you want to do first? Dealer's choice to you. AFC North recap or the trade deadline on Tuesday and expectations for that?
Yeah, let's get the AFC North and really the AFC in general wrapped up here real quick. What happened over the weekend?
Yeah, explosive day for offenses for the Baltimore Ravens and Cincinnati Bengals, both teams putting up 41 points in comfortable victories over the Broncos and Raiders, respectively. The Browns losing to the Chargers. They are 2-7. You get good Jameis Winston last week. You got bad Jameis Winston over the weekend. That is the story of his career. So current AFC North standings, Pittsburgh remains in first place at 6-2. Baltimore right behind at 6-3. Cincinnati with a must-win over the Raiders. They got it 4-5 on the season, and the Browns are working on their mock drafts for next year at 2-7, bottom of the AFC North. So the Bengals can still can't be counted out. That offense is super potent. We'll see if they make any deadline deals. Reportedly, they're looking for some defensive help, potentially at corner, potentially at rush end. Baltimore, of course, many still consider Baltimore the favorite in the AFC North, even over Pittsburgh as things stand today. So this thing's going to get pretty intense with Pittsburgh facing the AFC North gauntlet on the other side of that Washington game.
Yeah, especially as I highlighted there at the top of the show, you got Cincinnati and Baltimore playing on Thursday night. So all eyes will be definitely on that game. And the Bengals did not even have T. Higgins, I don't think, for this game. And they still able to move the ball up and down the field and score some points. And Baltimore, boy, both sides of the ball, really, they are looking okay right now for sure. Lamar Jackson's not having to drop back, a ton overall. And look, I know he went into that game. People kind of wondering about his workload in practice, but I think everybody kind of knew at their heart of hearts that he was going to play. And I would just imagine they're going to keep him on some sort of light work situation earlier in weeks moving forward. And obviously with them playing on a Thursday night this week, I wouldn't expect him to do too terribly much. And their bye week isn't even till, I think, week 14 of the season. So they've got obviously a couple of big games coming up. They got the Bengals on Thursday night. They turn around and play the Steelers. They got the Chargers after that, and then the Eagles after that before their bye week. So not an easy stretch of games for them, coming up overall, but they are playing very good football, and they easily handled the Broncos on Sunday there.
And the Broncos are not a bad team. That offense had been improving with Bo Nix, and it was 10-7 Baltimore after Nix caught that fourth down touchdown pass. And then from there, it was all Baltimore, and put up 41 on that Broncos defense that came into the game third in the NFL in scoring defense to really just blow them out, and big plays to Zay Flowers and Derrick Henry got going in the second half. Lamar could be looking at his third MVP. I mean, I don't know exactly the state of the MVP race right now, but he's got to be at the front of the pack, if not leading the entire NFL.
Yeah, he's playing good football, and they've got a lot of weapons over there. Deontay really, they added Deontay Johnson last week, and I don't, how many snaps, do you know how many snaps he ended up playing for them?
Not sure on the snaps. He did not catch a pass. I don't believe he was even targeted, so I'm assuming his snap count was pretty limited.
Let me see if I pull that up real quick. Overall here, looks like he played 17 snaps in total, 30% of them there. So obviously they'll try to get him up and running a little bit more in the offense. But yeah, Baltimore's going to be right there at the end. And once again, it's going to be an interesting game this Thursday against the Bengals. Bengals certainly need to help their cause and win that to get back in the thick of things. And they certainly aren't out of it, even though they started off the season with several losses there.
Which is their MO to start slow, and it's going to be a great rematch because remember that first Baltimore-Cincinnati game was one of the games of the year, that 41-38 overtime victory for the Baltimore Ravens. And so if we get anything close to that, and the rematch should be a lot of fun on Thursday night. And I suppose you root for Cincinnati to win that one to kind of just muddy the waters of the AFC North, or would you potentially want Baltimore to win it just to make it kind of closer to a true two-team race between Pittsburgh and Baltimore? Which would you prefer?
Yeah, it's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, right? Even if the Bengals were to lose to the Ravens, are they really out of it when you look at the second half of their schedule? I mean, they you obviously got two games against the Steelers, and the Steelers, obviously control their own fate there. Dallas is still on the schedule. They play the Chargers after they play the Ravens on Thursday night. They still get Tennessee, Cleveland, and Denver late in the year there. So you just you root for the asteroid.
I was going to say, we're going to take asteroid. I knew you were going to say that. There you go. Fair enough. And then the Browns are the Browns, but they're still a more feared team than they were with Deshaun Watson, just because whenever Winston is on his game, you can have some really impressive performances, as we saw in his first start. He can have some terrible ones, as we saw in yesterday's game against a good Chargers team, really good defense. So there's still, you'd still rather, if you're Pittsburgh, face the Browns with a Deshaun Watson led team as opposed to a Winston led team. But, when you start Jameis Winston for multiple games, you get the full Jameis Winston experience, which has a lot of highs and a lot of lows.
Yeah, and obviously the Steelers have them a couple times here in the second half of the season, and those games you kind of wondered how. Look, you got to go 4-2 in the division. It feels like you just do. At a minimum, you got to be 3-3, and at this point, the way the Browns look, and we'll see if they trade any of these pieces off here in the next 24 hours or whatnot. But those now become two games that you expect the Steelers to have.
Putting tiebreakers aside, how many wins do you think it'll take for the AFC North winner? How many wins would it require to win the North, I should say? Is it 11? Is it 12?
It might be 12 now. I think I was kind of thinking that the AFC North be a little bit more muted than it's shaping up to be, ahead of the season now. But I mean, Baltimore's playing really good ball. Cincinnati's getting right at the right time. The thing is how much do they beat up on each other, during the second half of the season here. So it feels like 12 wins would do it, but I mean, we'll see. It feels like the Steelers would need 12 wins though to get it done.
Yeah, I think 12 probably takes out the tiebreaker, because if Pittsburgh gets to 12, that means they had to have beaten Baltimore once and probably swept them if you're getting to 12. And so tiebreakers become less of an issue. I think you could do 11 and have some sort of tiebreaker potentially there. But yeah, I think it's going to take more than 10 to do that. So as you said, to get to 11, 12, there's a good chance you're going to need to go 4-2 in the division. That gets you to 10. And then you pick up a win or two with the other three. That's at Washington and then facing Philadelphia and Kansas City as your non-AFC North games the rest of the way. That is certainly a attainable, picture to paint, but still one that will require a lot of work.
I tell you, when you look at the AFC as a whole right now, even at the kind of the midway point here, the seven teams that hold that technically hold the playoff spots now are all over 500, and the other teams that are not in the playoff picture, all of those are under 500. We saw Indianapolis play last night in the game there, and they're going to have a lot of questions moving forward. You kind of wonder if they'll be able to get to above 500 throughout the second half of the season. Cincinnati in that group, and they're probably have the best chance of all these teams under 500 to get above 500 and get back in the playoff picture. The Jets, even though they pulled out a win, even though I think that they still are a good team on paper, they got a lot of work to do. They have to. I mean, to get to even 10-6, they'd have to, or 10-7, they'd have to only lose one more game going the rest of the way. I guess what I'm trying to say here is, boy, the Steelers' playoff chances at the midpoint of the season really look good at this point. You would have to think something disastrous to happen during these final half of the season for the Steelers not to make the playoffs at this point.
Right, but a huge difference between winning the division and having at least one home game versus a wildcard game where you're going on the road to who knows where, Baltimore. Kansas City's probably the one seed, so they're probably likely to get a first round bye. But whatever it is, Buffalo, you guys know the teams that are out there. Huge difference there. So capturing that AFC North crown, which this team has not done since 2020, is really step number one to getting this monkey off your back and overcoming that obstacle of not winning a playoff game since 2016.
Right, for sure.
All right, Dave, let's talk trade deadline and any acquisitions Pittsburgh could make to help them win the AFC North. And the good news is there's only one more day to talk about this stuff anymore. Right. It's just been an endless circle, obviously, of the same names and then slightly different names and moving on to the next. Mike Williams was always the name that we thought, okay, that's the most likely name you kind of go after if you miss out on the big names, Devontae Adams, Cooper Kupp, etc. Now it seems like Williams would probably stay with the Jets, considering that Alan Lazard got hurt. He's on IR with a chest injury. As you said, the Jets won this week on Thursday, so that gives them some hope and optimism. They can try to push for a wild card spot. Still can't put it at a 0% chance Williams gets moved, but it seems less likely than before. I guess the newest focal point name is Adam Thielen in Carolina. He's had a hamstring injury. He was held out in their win yesterday against the Saints, but some think he was held out to make sure he stays healthy, anticipating a trade there. Also, Jacoby Myers with the Raiders had a big day in that loss to the Bengals. Is that a name that potentially could be added or moved at the deadline by the Raiders? Those seem to be the top two names. Anybody else we'll have to wait and see on, but I guess those are the names we're kind of shifting towards.
Yeah, and the Rams won their game against the Seahawks, so you'd have to think that they're going to stay put with Cooper Kupp, and they pretty much had said as much coming out of that last win that they had in the previous week there. Who else here is out of it? Slayton. It'd be interesting to see what happens with the Giants now at the bottom. I mean, they're in last place overall in the NFC at this point, I think. So Slayton will be a guy to watch. Everybody else, I mean, it feels like Slayton, Thielen. Some people are trying to wonder whether or not the Seahawks might move on from DK Metcalf. Cordell Patterson kind of courted him playfully last night, I think, on Twitter. San Francisco, probably going to stay put with what they got going on over there. And the list is dwindling. I mean, Thielen doesn't move the needle much for me overall, but I would understand the reason why they went that way if they did, especially if you got them, swap of late picks or whatnot. But he is up there in age, and he has had some injury issues as of late. So I mean, it's easy to kind of connect the dots there, I suppose. Would Denver think about moving on from Cortland Sutton, with them still technically in the playoff picture as the 7th seed right now? Kind of hard to imagine that happening. You mentioned Mike Williams. Is there anybody on Tennessee really worth having at this point?
I think Nick Westbrook, I think it's Akine is how you pronounce it. I mean, he was a guy that Arthur Smith liked, coached him in Tennessee. He's a big body. He's a blocker. Dude's finding the end zone at a crazy clip. Dude's got like 10 catches this year and 5 or so touchdowns. That's a name I would consider to look at.
Miami, those two expensive guys, you'd kind of be surprised if either one of those guys were on the move with Waddle and Tyreek. I don't know. It feels like this is Thielen or Mike Williams, and if you were to build a list of 4 or 5 here, it would probably be Thielen, Slayton, Mike Williams, or Jacoby Myers.
Yeah, that seems as good a list as any. And I didn't mention Slayton off the top, even though I've talked about it. I'd be more than okay getting Slayton, is because the reporting has been the Giants, for whatever reason, just don't want to part with him, even though he's a free agent after this year and their season is going nowhere. I don't know if that's because they just want to give Daniel Jones and have as much talent as possible to try to save their jobs. I know that Mara said that they're safe, right? Daboll and company, but still want to win games and not, totally lose out to finish out the season. And he's in concussion protocol from getting hurt in yesterday's game. So I don't even know where his status is health-wise. Not that he'd be impossible to trade for, even with a concussion, but there's one more obstacle. Feels like every receiver, we should mention this was a big story that came out over the weekend, every receiver Pittsburgh has looked at has gotten hurt. Adam Schefter reporting over the weekend that Steelers are really working on a deal for Jaguars receiver Christian Kirk until he broke his collarbone 2 weeks ago. And so had that not happened, the belief is that there was a strong likelihood that Kirk would have become a Pittsburgh Steeler.
Yeah. And obviously a name that we've talked about here and there along the way here, but unfortunate, situation obviously with him. We wrote about that right as soon as he went down in that game, as soon as we knew what the injury was and all like that. Obviously news came out that he was going to be out for the season there. And then as you mentioned, Adam Schefter had the story yesterday morning about they were all set to get that deal done. So, look, deadline spur actions, right? So we're almost to the deadline. I don't know if we'll find out something today or by tomorrow morning or not, but the hours are ticking away here, and after 4 o'clock on Tuesday, that won't be a topic of discussion anymore. So, I've thought all along, and I think you have as well too, that this team at some point will do something here, and my gut still makes me think somebody's still incoming here.
If you had to pick one name as the most likely acquisition of the four that you mentioned, who would it be?
At this point, probably either Thielen or Slayton.
I would say Thielen, just based on the Giants reporting, like I said, of them wanting to keep him. I could see Myers getting dealt, but they've already traded away Devontae Adams, but they totally gut their roster at this point. They're just firing half their offensive coaching staff. And Williams just seems more likely to stay because of their win in New York and with the Lazard injury. So I just kind of leave Thielen as the default option, if nothing else. What the Kirk report showed me, at least implied to me, was Pittsburgh is willing to take on a guy with a bigger contract and is not necessarily looking for just a rental situation under contract through and past 2024. So I know that each situation is unique and case by case. And I don't know, the Jaguars would have been retaining salary, all that kind of stuff. Who knows? We'll never know. But Pittsburgh at least shows maybe a commitment to doing more than just rent for half a season.
Well, if you look at the Raiders wide receivers, what they have left over there, Trey Tucker, Jacoby Myers, DJ Turner, Ramel Keaton.
No idea who that even is, to be honest with you.
Alex Bachman. And if you look at their practice squad, I mean, Christian Wilkerson, Terrence Marshall Jr. I mean, Jalen Guyton is on the practice squad, it looks like. They've got a wide receiver on IR, it looks like, in Jeff Foreman. Yeah, they would really be gutting themselves there. And at least you would think that you'd want something to build around in a guy like Jacoby Myers, right? But
is he under contract next year? Or is he an expiring deal? He's under contract next year, so there will be some reason to keep him to have something to start working with for next season.
And the beauty, if the Steelers did trade for a guy like that, is you're getting a guy that comes with an additional contract year, and a very affordable one at that. I think he's got a base of $10.5 million, and you could certainly work around that with him as well too. So, that would be an added plus for adding a guy like Jacoby Myers, because it wouldn't necessarily just be a half-year rental.
Mm-hmm. Right.
You have a very manageable salary on top of that to work with him.
Yeah, $10.5 million as his base salary next year, which is high, but you could make it work. And who knows what could potentially happen here. Like I said, with Kirk, they were showing interest in the guy under contract beyond this season. With Thielen, I would have to go back and watch him. He did have a 1,000-yard season last year, quietly had a 100-catch a year, despite playing in a really tough passing offense. I mean, even on his final reception so far of 2024 was a great 31-yard diving catch against, I think that was the Raiders, where he actually got hurt his hamstring, and has been out ever since. So maybe there's a little bit of juice left in those legs, but he is 34. I don't know if he becomes a true number two, if he kind of becomes more of a rotation type thing. I mean, he's obviously had a great career, was fantastic in Minnesota. I could see it. The compensation would be super light. I mean, basically 7th round pick,
right.
2026, some sort of compensation. It's not going to be much because he's 34. He is under contract for next year too, with a pretty reasonable base salary. I think he has a roster bonus due in March. If you can check me on that, David. Yeah. It's $1.5 million roster bonus.
Yeah, 1.5 roster bonus that would be due. Looks like March 17th. and then a $4 million base salary, and it looks like he's got per game roster bonuses next year that total $1 million. Some of those are obviously would likely become not likely to be earned because of the time he's missed this year, and he's got a $250,000 workout bonus next year as well too. So I mean, any of these guys you could work around with Myers, Thielen, based on what they have, and the best thing about all of it is you're not trading for a guy that would essentially be a half a year rental.
Right. I mean, I'm not against really any of those names. You bring in some help, that's fine. I get the intent and add somebody after your months long searching, but it would be just it'll be almost a disappointment no matter what, because you dreamed about Ayuk and Adams, all these big names that could really move the needle. You wonder how much does a Slayton, or even I think a rung below would be a Thielen or a Mike Williams, how much they help you. And I'm not going to try to rewrite the thoughts on the current receiver group. It has to be upgraded, and that'll be a big offseason focus, I think, regardless of what happens by Tuesday at 4 p.m. But you are scoring. You're averaging, how many points are they averaging in the last 3 games? 30 points or so, with Van Jefferson, who's made some plays, Calvin Austin, who's made some plays. You've gotten production, and you've been able to move the ball with this unit, especially turning towards quarterback Russell Wilson. So do you need to add somebody else, or can you make it work? Because so far, you've been making it work with the pieces you have.
Yeah, but it's all about cost effectiveness versus talent, right? So, I mean, if you can get it done and it not cost you to farm and give up, why wouldn't you try to upgrade the room? Even
I guess the question is, how much of an upgrade is it? How much does it make your room better? Is the thought, especially mid-season, add a guy trying to catch on to your team, not just a talent, but then get integrated into your system on the fly.
I mean, I think guys like Slayton and Myers upgrade you.
Yeah, I think, again, I'm all for Slayton. If you want to trade a 5th-round pick for Slayton, do it. I mean, I'm doing that for sure. And Myers, there'll be an upgrade there. I mean, he's generally been the less discussed name, but he's got some size, and he made some plays against the Bengals secondary yesterday. So I do get that, but I just wonder, I mean, okay, would Jacoby Myers become a true number 2? Would he be an every down number 2 receiver if Pittsburgh acquired him?
I mean, I think he would.
Okay. I wonder if there'll still be some sort of rotation, and especially early on as he kind of gets his feet wet, it might be hard to do that.
Sure. I mean, you see what Deontay Johnson went through. I mean, there obviously is an adjustment period in there in the first couple of weeks, but I would think a couple of weeks in the fold, you should be able to get him up and running.
Yeah, the concern though, it's a couple weeks in, and so by that point you're in like week 12 or week 13, who knows, and then you're trying to really maximize a couple weeks skill set and time frame, and will that happen? It's just hard to project that out. So I'm not against the move, but I just wonder at this point how much it's actually going to help.
And then even after let's say you get the Commanders on Sunday, and you have to turn around and play the Ravens game is also on a Sunday, but then the game after that's a Thursday night game, right, against the Browns. But I mean, you should be able to. I would think if you traded for a guy, any guy right now, he might be a little limited in his first game against the Commanders this week, but by the following week, I mean, you would think the acumen and the ability to pick things up and stuff like that should happen by week 11.
Sure, that's fair, and I agree. But then you never know, okay, how well does he really grasp the system on the fly? Some guys do, some guys don't. It's kind of a dart. Remember when they signed Desmond King last year and just never was able to stick and that type of stuff. So it's kind of a coin flip whether or not that guy's really able to kind of fit and hit the ground running, if it's just a really kind of big, I don't know, onboarding period. And by the time it kind of figures it out, you're kind of moving on without him because you're deep into the season and you're just kind of rolling with the group that you have. So I don't know. It's a lot of rambling, and we'll just see what happens, I suppose.
Yeah, and look, we've talked about this dating all the way back into the offseason here, thinking that this wide receiver room needed more, and even at 6-2 right now, and I know they've Russell Wilson's done a good job of spreading the football around, and I mean, there's still, to me, you need to make every effort. Now, I've said this all along. I know you agree. You need to make every effort still, even this late in the process, I think, to upgrade the wide receiver room.
I agree. I just wonder how many of those upgrades are left to be had. I mean, my stance is, maybe this is, I don't know, just Stockholm syndrome of I'm accepting my fate here with all these discussions. But if they don't make a move, I'm not going to be as crushed or as disappointed as I was, a month ago, or certainly at the beginning of the season or back in the summer, because they've explored all these options. None have been able to fit. This offense is scoring even with the current group of receivers. There is some playmaking talent there. And, I think this offense can still produce at the level it needs to, even with the current group that it has. Although I still certainly understand and agree that come the offseason, receivers going to be high on their list of need.
Right. Right.
Just for fun, any other position they could target out there? To be any surprise of a position, offensive tackle depth, which I know is still so hard to find, from another team on the fly through a trade. Anything else? Cornerback depth? Could they go out there and find anything else?
It doesn't seem as plausible. I don't know, with losing, when are you going to get a guy like Montravius Adams back or something? Could you upgrade a guy like, from Dean Lowry or something like that? A low level rotational guy in the middle of that defense. Maybe that's something that you look at. I wouldn't count on it. To me, it feels like this is going to be wide receiver or nothing here. I mean, corners obviously been playing well overall. I mean, if you could get a third corner, rotational guy, or at least a guy that's got some experience as backup to come in to give you a better option over say a James Pierre type, because right now you've got you brought up CJ Henderson. He's on the 53 right now. So could you technically upgrade that? Yeah, I think you could, especially if you found a guy that played a little on special teams. But the talk all along's obviously been wide receivers. So I would be surprised if they went another position here. But if they were, I would suppose it would be, backup corner or another guy in the middle of the defensive line.
Yeah, I think obviously the odds of another position being added is pretty low from a need standpoint, from a what's available standpoint. Cam Sutton also returning. Does that roster exemption expire today, or does it technically run through? Would they have to make the move tomorrow? Do we have the exact wording on that exemption for Cam Sutton?
I thought it expires 4:00 today.
Okay. I think you're right. I just wasn't 100% sure on how that got couched. So we would expect by today that he would get officially added to the 53. And I think this team has 2 open roster spots on the 53. So there would not be a need for a corresponding move to get him on the 53, correct?
Is it 2 or is it 1 right now?
I've lost track. I thought it was 2 in my head after Cook got waived, but I don't have a spreadsheet keeping tabs on the spots. I thought it was 2. Was in my head.
I don't have it pulled up either right now.
Okay, but they have at least 1 open spot where they won't have to make a corresponding move for Cam Sutton, and we'll see what happens later this week with Tyler Medikevich as he's on IR to return, and I hope can return. And just the good news is this team in general is getting healthier, which is also one reason why trading for other positions seems less and less likely. Zach Frazier hopefully coming back. Cordero Patterson coming back, Cam Sutton off suspension, Nick Herbig hopefully coming back. Nothing guaranteed on those guys. Mike Tomlin will talk to the media Tuesday and hopefully give an update. I'm sure he will on the health of the team, but you would expect or at least anticipate those guys playing in Week 10.
Yeah, you hope that Wednesday's injury report's really light coming out of a bye week with some of these guys coming back and all. So we'll see what Mike Tomlin says on Tuesday.
All right, and be back on Wednesday to discuss what moves the team did or did not make. But I'll just call a shot here. I'm going to call a shot for a prediction. I will say Pittsburgh trades for Carolina Panthers receiver Adam Thielen for, I don't know,
7th or 6th or something.
Something like that. I mean, Pittsburgh, I guess, technically doesn't have a 6th rounder to give. We talked about that on Friday's show because it's being held by Chicago in the Fields deal. So maybe it really just becomes a 7th round pick to the Panthers.
Yeah, that sounds like the most logical dart throw here.
So we'll see. We will see what happens. All right, Dave. Shorter show today. I was going to ask you this on Friday, but the show ran long, and so I just tabled this to Monday since we weren't going to have as much to discuss. What are your expectations for this team the back half of the season? The front half went about as well as you could try to predict out or ask for to be 6-2, first place in the North, generally pretty healthy. quarterback situation was a little murky, but you're finding your stride and confidence in Russell Wilson. What are you expecting from this team the back half?
Yeah, they are exiting their bye week to as far as my expectations went at the start of the season, a better team than what I probably envisioned they would be. I thought they would have at least one more loss at this point right now than they have. We talked a lot about how this team had to make hay in the first half of the season, and then you see, obviously things have changed in the AFC North with teams like the Browns not being competitive and looking like you should, at least sweep them in the second half of the season. The Eagles are playing a lot better as of late, but I think that's a team that you could still potentially beat. The Commanders are a better team than I think most people thought they might be at the beginning of the season. So that becomes a game that's certainly not a give me at this point. On the road, you've got the 2 games against Baltimore that I think that you hope that you can get a split at least with those 2 games. Kansas City's obviously tough in there, and Cincinnati's playing a lot better ball at this point here. So at worst right now, at the absolutely worst, I would expect this team to win 10, go 10-7 at the absolute worst. And I think at best you're looking at a 12-5 team. It feels like. So my optimism, and look, once again, I did not have this team making the playoffs. And at this point, if they didn't make the playoffs, it would be very, very concerning because, you've got 6 wins on the board at this point. You would think 10 would get you into the tournament. So you're telling me you can't win 4 more games in your last, 9 here? I think this is a playoff team, and I think the way they've played right now, from what we've seen as of the last couple of weeks here, with this team also seemingly getting healthy at just the right time here, this becomes a team that I feel not only has good prospects of making the playoffs, but winning at least one playoff game and potentially, more than that. You have to be optimistic about, or at least I am, of where this team is to where I thought they would be at this point of the season, going into things here.
Sure. Yeah, if you told me that Pittsburgh did not make the playoffs, my response would be who all got hurt? Because barring just a litany of injuries at crucial positions, it's hard to see this team missing it. Now you got to play the games, and it's a tough schedule, yada yada. There's no guarantees, but historically, Pittsburgh 6-2 teams are 6-2. Their odds of making the playoffs are astronomically high, just based on how Pittsburgh's constructed. Hard to see them not doing that. The question, like I said earlier, is can you win the AFC North, and can you beat Baltimore in those 2 games? Pittsburgh has had a ton of success against them over the last couple of seasons, but Baltimore, still a difficult challenge every year, and their offense looks as strong as ever before in 2024. What would you say is the greatest strength of the Pittsburgh Steelers in present form?
Their greatest strength.
Yeah, anything can be their best part of the team.
Defense and keeping opposing teams out of the end zone, really keeping the points down, and that's something that we expected this team to have a strong defense. Now, there have been times, obviously, against the run specifically, that you're thinking, man, you got to get this thing solved earlier in games, but even throughout all that, some of the explosive plays they've given up in the passing game, they're still keeping teams out of the end zone overall. And if you keep teams 17 points or lower in games, with this offense, you're going to win. You're going to win some games here. So the strength is the defense, but the offense has more than carried their load of water here as of late. I like the way the running game is going right now, and as we talked about even a couple of weeks ago, after all the injuries that this team had on the offensive line, I said at the time I thought, based on what I'd seen early on out of McCormick and say Amalo coming back, and obviously you haven't had Frazier for the last couple of games, but for what we saw out of Frazier to start the season has been very, very impressive. I thought the offensive line had the opportunity to be just fine and weather the proverbial storm, which they have. So as long as they're able, and Najee's played some really good football, running the football. Warren's getting healthier by the week and adding something there. You hope to get Patterson back here. They've offensively, they've done a lot of things we expected them to do with the personnel groupings. I think one thing that's been a positive is the way Russell Wilson's been able to spread the football around a little bit more to some of these eligible wide receivers. As of late, you still haven't had that kind of Pat Freiermuth explosion game. You kind of expected him to have a little bit stronger season than he's had to date. You would expect maybe more of that as you get into some of these winter months and maybe a more shorter, concise passing game. Russell Wilson's pushed the football down the field. There's a lot of there's a lot of positives, I think, coming out offensively of where I thought this team might be based on just the games that Russell Wilson has started alone.
I agree, and I think specifically defensively is their greatest strength, but really their ability to take the football away at a really high clip consistently. That's been true since 2019. No team over that span is more takeaways than the Pittsburgh Steelers. They have 15 this year, which is one of the better numbers in football. And some of the teams who are tied or above them have not had their bye week, and so they've had the extra game in there. And so that turnover differential, they all go hand in hand. And again, I'll just stress one more time, in today's modern NFL, it's less about how many yards do you give up? It's just about how many points do you give up? And can you take points off the board? Pittsburgh officially has the #1 red zone defense in the NFL this season, and they take the football away in those moments at a really high clip. And so when you can take away the football, you limit scoring, you steal possessions, you create good field position, you rob teams of points. And so I think you have that as your greatest strength. And then it's a really good special teams unit. I think you've just seen a lot of complementary football with the offense, defense, special teams, all making plays, all feeding off of each other. And that's really important. I've heard that phrase, that word used a ton in Pittsburgh the last couple of weeks, and it's the correct term to use, complementary football. I think they're really all working together. It's not just the defense carrying the offense as it has had for so many seasons, or you go back to the Killer B area, the offense really carrying the defense. It's been all three phases, impressing and improving. And when you can do that with a stout defense, we mentioned it before, Dave, have a top 5 scoring defense, an average scoring offense, a top 5, if not top 3, top 1 special teams unit, you put that recipe together, you get a really impressive product on the other side.
Yeah, look, as positive as we feel about this offense coming out of these last several games here and through the bye week here, there's still room for improvement, especially starting games faster, right? Not settling for these field goals. Be nice to the next time that we talk about this team going down the field and scoring a touchdown on their opening offensive possession. Would love to see that happen against the Washington Commanders on Sunday. And look, when you play some of these teams like the Ravens and the Bengals and the Eagles, in the second half, you're going to have to jump on these teams. A bunch of field goals probably not going to get it done. So the good thing is even though there have been some positives with this offense the last several weeks specifically, there is room for improvement, and part of that improvement will be starting games faster and putting 7 on the board instead of 3. But just a summary of everything, that this team coming out of the bye week is little better than marginally better than where I thought they would be at this point of the season. And there's still plenty to build on offensively. And you got to like what the defense has done. And defensively, there's still things to build on, especially against the run coming out of the game against the Giants as well, too. So if they strengthen these few minor areas where they're weak on both sides of the football, and special teams continues to play, do their part, they at a minimum they should have, it feels like, 11 wins, come at the end of the season here. But it will be interesting. Look, if you don't take care, if you go under 500 for whatever reason in these next 5 games that they have, 2 of which against the Browns, it does set up for an interesting final 4 games against the Eagles, Ravens, Chiefs, and Bengals. I'll tell you that.
Oh, yeah, it's going to be a fight to the finish for sure. And just by virtue of the team having the bye week and doing nothing and teams sliding around them, I just checked the numbers. Pittsburgh's offense, scoring offense, 13th in the NFL. And for some teams,
for average.
Yeah, maybe for some teams, you're not celebrating that quite as much if you're a high octane offense for several seasons. But for Pittsburgh, we've not heard 13th in a long time. In 2020, they were the 12th ranked scoring offense to finish the season. If Pittsburgh can find a way to be better than that, they'll have their best finish since 2018. And that was like the last good offense that we really saw in Pittsburgh was like 2018. Even the 2020 version was not as good as, they had that great 11-0 start, but it just felt a little fake. I don't know, but it was not as good as maybe the 2018 offense, 2017 offenses were. So to be 13th, averaging 23.4 points per game and hopefully ascending with Wilson, is really exciting for sure. So going to face some tough defenses, including one this week in Washington, but hopefully just onwards and upwards for the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Yep. And what have they scored? Like 90? How many points have they scored these last three weeks?
It was 32 against the Raiders, 37 against the Jets, and 26 against the Giants. So the math on that is...
What's that, 95?
95 points. Yeah, I don't know last time they scored 95 in a 3-game span. Should have looked that up. Maybe they did it last year when they scored 30 back-to-back. No, because they only scored 17 or so in that rain game against Baltimore. I don't know last time they scored 95 in 3 straight games or in a 3-game span, but it's probably been a while.
All right.
What would you say is the biggest concern about this team going forward? We talked about the greatest strength. What is the biggest red flag?
Just can continue to build on what they've done offensively and putting, starting faster in games overall on the offensive side of football. I think the defense will be fine. You get guys like Cameron Sutton back in the fold here.
Herbig coming back.
Yeah, Herbig coming back. That's big because of the rotation it provides you without the drop off there. Just offensively, just keeping that continuity up and scoring 7 points instead of 3 down the field in first halves of these games.
Yeah, that is fair for sure overall. I think for me, and this is kind of a hyper-focused point, but I would say the run defense, not, again, what I said about the Giants game when they gave up 150 plus, I'm willing to chalk that up as a one-off, but my concern is, and I have a video coming out a bit later this week on the topic, is the threat of the running quarterbacks. When Pittsburgh faces those more mobile quarterbacks, the run defense, the structure of it changes into their disadvantage, to Pittsburgh's disadvantage, where you got to respect the zone read, the mesh point more, and it doesn't allow backside players like a TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith, Nick Herbig to pursue as heavily as before. And I think that's really hurt them. You talk about one reason why that Giants run game was successful was because of the threat of Daniel Jones. Think about the Colts game with Richardson before he got hurt, and that run game was humming. And when he went out and Flacco came in, Flacco chewed him up in the pass game for sure, but in the run game, the Colts really didn't have as much success. And so you're facing a back half of the schedule with Jaden Daniels, with Lamar twice, with Jalen Hurts, and you got some really good run threats there. Will Pittsburgh's run defense be able to hold up? I'm concerned about that. And if they can't stop the run, offenses stay balanced, and they can't get one-dimensional, Pittsburgh can't pin their ears back, and it all kind of, cascades from there.
Well, and the good thing, though, is you know what to expect with Lamar Jackson and the Ravens. You've done that so many times, and you've had success for the most part when it comes to controlling him, and also with him being banged up. How much, and them having the run threat of a Derrick Henry, can you dial down? Because look, if you overcompensate for a guy like Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry's gonna go $175 on you.
Right. Yeah, Pittsburgh has contained Lamar well, but at the cost of the running back, J.K. Dobbins or Gus Edwards, whoever having success. And when that guy's Derrick Henry, man, look out.
Yeah, look, Jaden Daniels, I mean, that's a good warm up to have here before Lamar Jackson and company, because he obviously can use his feet as well.
Right. So that's going to be a big challenge, and facing Lamar after that, and then facing them later in the season. And the Eagles, that's their personality. It's going to be less so for the Mahomes and the Burrows, and not an issue with Jameis Winston, but I'm worried about that. But I think the fast starts in general, as you said, Dave, is also a big concern. It's still been a theme with this offense. Even under Russell Wilson, they've been better, a little just sputtering, not we're winning in the red zone. Red zone offense a concern, 28th in red zone scoring this year. But I know if and when Pittsburgh makes the playoffs, the stat I'll be talking about to probably great annoyance that week is going to be 66-0, which is what Pittsburgh's been outscored in the first quarter of their last 5 playoff games. 66-0, all losses, including the Buffalo game last year. So can Pittsburgh get off to not even a fast start, but just not implode in the first 15 minutes of the game and dig a hole they have to spend the next 3 quarters digging out of? That's going to be like literal first step one to hang around in a playoff game and hopefully win it.
And luckily, we haven't had to see this team yet have to overcome a big deficit overall, right?
Right. But you wonder when that time will come. I imagine it'll happen at some point. I mean, there was the Colts game where they got down 17-0 and nearly came back. But yeah, can this team play from behind? They've certainly benefited from playing from ahead, as all teams who probably are 6-2 or better have been able to enjoy this year. But yeah, when they can't run the ball as often as they would like to, can the O-line pass protect and that type of stuff? That is a fair critique and concern.
This is the most optimistic I've been about a Steelers offense in quite a while.
Yeah, I think reasonably so. And especially with Wilson at quarterback, you've seen this offense take a next step. And that's huge. And that's why Tomlin made the switch to see, can we get more than what we've gotten in the past about being an offense that is ball control and can, do some decent things, can run the ball with success, but can still only score about 20 points per game. That may not be a formula to win in the playoffs. And Wilson showing this offense can hopefully be one that scores 28 points in the game, 30 points in the game to get you a playoff win.
Yep.
All right, Dave, anything else to discuss here today? Any other thoughts, feelings coming out of the bye week?
No, not overly. I'm excited to get into the Commanders film a little bit more, get that game that they just had over the weekend downloaded and gone through here, getting more of a head start on this week because of the bye week. So we should have some good conversations on Wednesday and Friday.
All right. So just a reminder, Dave and I will have a live stream tonight at 7 p.m. Eastern time, answering any and all of your questions exiting the bye week. So check that out on the YouTube channel and come back Wednesday and discuss Mike Tomlin, trade deadlines, and everything else.
All right, let's get to a few reader emails we have left over in here. One from Nathan Casey. Says, I saw that they switched TJ Watt a few snaps last game to make the other team adjust. Is there any reason they don't occasionally more fake rush TJ to tie up resources and drop him into zone? Also blitzing more off the other edge, basically using the knowledge they are chipping tight end, helping and sliding the line to TJ to the Steelers' advantage. So I guess he just wants to know, is there any reason they don't occasionally more fake rush TJ to tie up resources and then drop him into zone, along with blitzing more off the other edge? Well, yeah, I guess it just comes down to how many snaps a game do you want TJ not rushing, rushing the quarterback?
Yeah, he's a guy that certainly can drop into coverage, but he gets paid the big bucks to rush the passer. And so he does that a lot. I mean, some other more nuanced reasons, because they're blitzing less, there's less of a need to drop a guy. If you're kind of trying to do a safe pressure blitz where you're bringing the safety from the one side and then dropping the backside edge guy, then that'll, decrease the opportunities. If you're not doing that as often, then you just have a need to drop Watt into coverage less. If you're facing fewer twin wide receiver sets, typically in some of those base situations, if they're facing a 2x2 set, let's say at a 12 personnel, you got 2 receivers to one side, Pittsburgh may walk out their linebacker and be the overhang player on their twin receiver set. Maybe you've seen that less this year. I don't know the data on that, but that may be a factor. Maybe Pittsburgh's matching up and playing that corner over the receiver instead of playing sides. That can also be a factor that'll influence how often an outside linebacker is dropping and playing in coverage. So probably some small things like that. My charting has him about think 6-7% drop rate this year, which is about what he's been, a little bit less this year than last year, but it's an insignificant difference in my charting overall. So bottom line is he's TJ Watt, and you want that guy rushing the passer and forcing teams to have to slide and defend him. Why they haven't switched him as often and played him on the one side, it's worked. I mean, he's still led the NFL in sacks 3 times before, playing on one side of the ball. And so if it's not broke, don't fix it. He's more comfortable rushing from that side he's talked about. I think the change you saw last week was him not going without a sack for 2 games. And so when that kind of happens, you sit there and say, okay, can we do a couple of different things to try to get that sack number started again? And you got 2 sacks against the Giants.
I think, one of the things that we said we're going to continue to monitor is how many times a game they continue to maybe switch Watt over to the other side. I'm looking forward to maybe 3 or 4 times a game, something along those lines, and maybe you catch them in a key situation, a key down and distance where they get lulled to sleep with him being on one side, that they forget to move a tight end over to his side or whatever side, So and look, the return of Nick Herbig is obviously huge because you can potentially get Watt off the field for another snap or 2 or 3 a game on top of it, and Highsmith's coming off of a couple of, you got into quite a Twitter, or there's one guy on Twitter that comes after you all the time about trying to bang on Alex Highsmith, and I don't know how you can't look at how Highsmith's played the last couple of games and not be impressed with what he's done overall. And this is, I mean, you add Nick Herbig to the group of the 3. I mean, is there a better top 3 edge rusher group, in the NFL than those 3 right now, especially assuming that you get the same version of Herbig coming off of an injury that you had before he got injured?
I mean, I have not done a deep dive into depth charts, but I think it'd be hard pressed to find a better 3. I don't know who has it between Watt and Highsmith and Herbig. And yeah, Highsmith's been a big boost. I mean, I know it was Hubbard and that was a tough situation, but I mean, he just dominated Chris Hubbard against the Giants in that Monday night game. And what Herbig can do, his efficiency is off the chart. So it is as good a top 3 and probably the best top 3 for my money.
All right, Jay in Buffalo says, now that Mason Rudolph has had several starts, what would the Steelers' record be if he was their starting quarterback right now? I don't think they'd have a better record than they have right now. I'll tell you that.
They lose any games they've won with Mason Rudolph at quarterback.
Let me roll back through here real quick.
Atlanta, Denver, Chargers.
They held Atlanta to 10 points. You would think that Mason would still be able to win that one. They held Denver
the first
to
3
6
games.
points. Chargers 10 points.
So then it's the last 3: the Raiders, the Jets.
I don't know. Do they? I mean, they ended up handling the Jets pretty good overall. I mean, I'll just say I don't see them having a better record than 6-2. I'll tell you that.
But do they have a worse record than 6-2?
Potentially. I'm glad we don't have to find out.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, you wouldn't have had the run element that the Fields had that you leaned on so much. But you look at the first 3 games, like you said, with how well the defense played, could Rudolph had led this team to more than just the 1 more point than they gave up over that span, which was, very little. You still think he would, and you still probably beat the Raiders. The Jets, do you win? I mean, the defense played so lights out in the second half. I don't know, and it's all spilt milk. And I still think it's clear to say there's been an upgrade to get Wilson, and certainly what he can still potentially be, what more this offense can potentially do. You'd have a similar record, I'm sure, but you would not feel as good about the playoff hopes as you would right now with Wilson at quarterback. I'll put it that way.
Agreed. James Cicinelli writes in, great podcast and website as always. I have a request. I'm heading to the Steelers Commanders game. I was there in 2008 when we made Jason Campbell use the silent count. I think the multitude of Steeler fans should sing Renegade in the fourth quarter when it usually plays at home games. Just want to put the idea out there for something we could start a trend, he says. Look, I mean, with the proximity of the Commanders game to Pittsburgh, I'm trying to remember what the turnout was for that game. I would imagine it was pretty good back in 2008, right?
How good was Washington at that time? I forget. I mean, it's probably. I mean, Steeler fans always, represent well on the road, but I imagine that Washington crowd is feeling it. Their first successful season in a long, long time, post Dan Snyder, all that fun stuff. So, I mean, I imagine it's not going to be as much a takeover as it probably would have been in past years. I don't know what 2008 looked like, but
Well,
Pittsburgh.
here's the thing. Washington, I pulled up the schedule. Washington at the time of that game was 6-2
In 2008.
in 2008. They
Oh,
played
wow.
the Steelers in week 9 that year, and they were 6-8. And I can't for the life of me. I mean, I would imagine just for the proximity alone, a lot of Steelers fans showed up at that. I can't imagine. Look, money talks, right? Steeler fans are not afraid to pay for tickets on the road. So it's hard for me to imagine us not having another pregame talk or pregame reports on Twitter. Boy, just look at the Steeler fans in the stadium here.
Do you think it'll be at like Raiders game levels though, or Falcons game levels?
Probably not to that degree, but I would imagine it's going to be. I can't imagine it not being significant.
Yeah,
Just
I mean, there'll be a lot
proximity.
Sure, there'll be a lot of Steeler fans there for sure. Will it be enough to be able to hear our Renegade song from the crowd? I don't know if there'll be enough fans to make that audibly heard. I know it's kind of a jokey suggestion, but I wonder if the turnout would be enough to pull that off. But feel free if you want to organize it.
Yeah,
I am not a singer. I will not be at the game, but sing to your heart's content.
All right, let's see. Brian Tellini writes in, good morning, Dave and AK. After a few games of much improved offensive performance, it seems a lot of opinions on adding a wide receiver have changed from it being a major need to a minor need, in my opinion, with the way we are playing, looking like a true threat in the AFC. We should be trying to add someone now more than ever, similar to what the Chiefs seem to do every year and trying to improve on a weakness. The Steelers need to do the same. We can win with who we have, but adding someone like Slayton at least gives us some flexibility with an injury as opposed to leaving it to chance in a year. We have got to find some January success. Make your move, Omar. He says, look, they should be doing, Brian, I agree, they should be doing everything within reason to add to that wide receiver room with several of the names that we went over once again earlier in the show there. So I would expect phone calls if nothing's consummated at this point to continue. And yeah, I agree that they need to exhaust all options to try to upgrade that wide receiver room in their eyes here in the next 24 hours.
Yeah, we'll see. And if not, they'll run back with the group that they have and try to make it work. And so far it has been working, but can you find an upgrade? If you can get a Slayton, again, I'm all for that. It's the top name on my list right now. Everything else feels like a rung below. Maybe Myers is relatively close. I just don't know where Thielen is at. It's just kind of a bit of an unknown with the injury. He's 34. Can you get the guy that made some plays last year or not? We'll see. We'll talk to you guys Wednesday about it.
Yeah. Let's do one last one from Rick here. Says, hey guys, thanks for all the coverage. More of a rule type question. The punch seems to be a weapon of choice to cause a fumble. The punch that knocked out the Russell Wilson fumble went through his head first. Should this not be a penalty? I get there isn't bad intent, but it is a thrown punch landing to a helmet, which also warrants an ejection. Just wanted your thoughts. Do you remember trying to recall? Did it seem like he got punched in the? I'd have to go back and look at it. I don't remember thinking when watching the TV tape of it, thinking, "Oh, he got punched in the head first." Do you? You got the pull up?
I'm sorry. Which play was it?
The Russell Wilson fumble.
Oh, yeah. I think he did get hit in the face mask. I didn't. I remember someone saying that. I don't remember in my head visualizing that moment. I've seen that happen around the NFL and the college game. I think TJ Watt a year or two ago was trying to punch the ball out and ended up, just like hitting a dude in the head a bunch of times. I don't know, that it's a tricky one because, as you said, technically, I mean, in any other situation, you punch a guy in the head, you're getting ejected. But you're going to really eject a guy for just going for a punch on the fly. Both guys flying around, trying to, time that up so perfectly. Hard to do. Easy to look at a slow-mo replay and oh, he missed. But, when you do that stuff live, it's hard to aim that up perfectly. You can eject a guy for that. Should there be a penalty, though? I don't know. I mean, I get to the letter of the law. You punch a guy in the helmet, but to me, it's hard to make that a penalty because it's going to lead to a lot of, I don't know. I think it's going to lead to some bad outcomes and, some game changing moments where guys get penalized or rejected for, stuff that's unintentional, as the reader said. So I probably wouldn't really address that or change that.
Yeah. I'll have to go back and look at that. I'm not recalling him getting hit. I'll have to go back and look at that. But
I think it did happen.
Good question. Good question, Rick. All right, Alex. Let's see. We're about an hour and 10 into this. We'll call this a shorter show this week. We'll be back on Wednesday. We will be talking about whether or not the Steelers made some sort of a trade. Or multiple trades. We'll be talking about a Mike Tomlin press conference from Tuesday, start looking ahead to the Washington game, and we'll see what else happens around the NFL as far as trades go and all as well. So in the meantime, you can follow me on Twitter /X at Steelers Depot. Follow Alex at Alex_Kozora. Don't forget the live stream on YouTube tonight at 7 Eastern time. You can follow the show at Terrible Podcast. Email the show, theterriblepodcast@gmail.com. If you like what we do and want to donate to the cause, SteelersDepot.com, hit the donate button. Also, if you like an ad-free version of the site, SteelersDepot.com, hit the ad-free button. Follow the directions that way. And until Wednesday, we'll have something to talk about, either good, bad, indifferent on Wednesday. So until then, as always, thanks for listening to the Terrible Podcast with Dave and Alex.